Hi, this is Kristjana from the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula, and I'm coming to you today to talk about buffalo soldiers. Maybe you got an activity kit from Empower Place at the food bank, or perhaps from Boys and Girls Club, and you're curious about buffalo soldiers. We have tons of links on our YouTube page that have stories about the 25th Infantry, and by tons I mean two or three. But today I'm going to read you this story, which is Buffalo Soldiers, the story of Emanuel Stance, and it is written by Robert Miller. This is a story about buffalo soldiers that lived in Texas, so a little bit different from the ones that the folks that lived at Fort Missoula, but still a representative story about a real person who was a buffalo soldier. So we'll get started. So there's an author's note here that I think is useful. It says, on July 28, 1866, 1 year and 3 months after the Civil War ended, the United States Congress voted to add 4 all-black infantry regiments to the Army. They were the 24th and 25th Infantry Regiments and the 9th and 10th Cavalries. Their first assignments sent the soldiers out west to protect white settlers from Indian raids. But these brave and courageous men soon earned the respect of the Indians they defeated. They were called the Buffalo Soldiers, named for the resemblance of their hair to the buffalo's hair. Many black soldiers earned medals of honor during those clashes with the Indians, but the first to win that medal was 19-year-old Emanuel Stance. There's a little picture there. In the late 1860s, the West began to grow as fast as the young colt. Settlers loaded their covered wagons, formed wagon trains, and headed for the wide open spaces. All they thought about was settling the new land. It never dawned on them that the land they were claiming belonged to the Comanche, the Kiowa, the Cheyenne, and the Apache Indians. Soon trouble started brewing like a country stew, the kind you don't serve at the kitchen table. There's our settlers. Reports of Indian raids on settlers reached the United States government. The government decided that something had to be done to protect the settlers. On July 28, 1866, Congress voted to add 4 all-black infantry regiments to the U.S. Army. After the Civil War, black people had a hard time finding work. When they heard they could join the Army and earn $13 a month plus food and shelter, many signed up. Among those who wanted to be a soldier was a young man named Emanuel Stance. 19-year-old Emanuel Stance lived in Charleston, South Carolina with his mother. The Army is hiring and I'm going to be a soldier, Emanuel told his mother as he packed a small bag. He stood barefoot and barely 5 feet tall in a pair of raggedy pants. His shirt was 2 sizes too big for him. Emanuel's mother shook her head. After a moment, she sighed deeply and said, "Well, I suppose we could use the money. Lord knows there ain't much for a boy to do round here. But you be mighty careful, Emanuel, you hear me? Oh, Mama, you're going to be so proud of me. You'll see, I'm going to be somebody." Emanuel finished packing. He smiled at his mother and looked around the shack they lived in. Then he stepped out the door and started the long journey to New Orleans. When Emanuel arrived in New Orleans, it didn't take him long to find out where to sign up for the Army. Soon he, along with hundreds of other black men, were standing in line to make $13 a month, but Emanuel wasn't thinking about the money. All he could think about was wearing a blue Army uniform and marching tall. Though Emanuel hadn't fought in the Civil War, he could remember black soldiers marching through Charleston, their backs straight and their heads held higher than an eagle can fly. They marched as if they were one man. There was something about being a soldier that made you somebody, Emanuel thought. Meanwhile, the 2 commanding officers, Colonel Hatch and Major Morrow, watched the recruits as they signed up. They knew they had to get the men ready for combat. Training at Fort McCavitt under the hot sun was no picnic. From sunup to sundown, Major Morrow drilled the black troops. They marched in ranks. They rode their horses in formation. They got so good at firing their rifles and their pistols, not a man in the white infantry could challenge them. As Major Morrow trained his troops, he felt the pride and determination. He was sure that his troop, the 9th Cavalry, would become one of the finest groups of fighting men in the country. At last, the troop got its first assignment. They were ordered to patrol the area above Fort Clark, along the Kickapoo River in Texas. There, the Kiowa and Comanche were raiding wagon trains. They were taking horses and setting wagons on fire. Emanuel Stance was ready as anyone to ride out in the morning. During his free time, he chopped wood and carried heavy equipment to build up his muscles. Emanuel's buddies were impressed by his efforts. They knew that he had that little extra spark of determination that makes a person stand out. Early the next morning, Major Morrow and a small scouting party from the Ninth Cavalry rode out looking for Kiowas. About 10 miles from Fort McKavett, they spotted a band of 20 Kiowas heading straight for a wagon train of settlers. "Left flank to the rear, right flank follow me," shouted the major. Instantly, the men split up. Emanuel led the left flank. The raiding party of Kiowas was gaining on the settlers, but the Ninth was gaining on the Kiowas. The soldiers galloped closer, then fired their rifles. Feeling the loss of their men, the Kiowa broke ranks and galloped away. "After them," shouted Major Morrow. Emanuel and his men chased after the Kiowas, firing their rifles until it was clear that the Indians were really retreating. Providing cover on both sides, the Ninth Cavalry escorted the wagon train safely back to Fort McKavett. The soldiers had passed the first test in battle. They faced a fierce group of Kiowas and won. "I think we've got one of the bravest and best trained groups of men I've ever seen in battle," Major Morrow told Colonel Hatch. One soldier showed himself to be a natural born leader. "Which soldier?" the colonel wanted to know. "Emanuel Stance," replied the major. For the next 3 years, Emanuel Stance fought bravely during many battles with raiding Indians. He rose to the rank of sergeant and was highly respected by his men. On May 20th, 1870, a man named Captain Carroll, Sergeant Emanuel Stance, and a group of black soldiers went out in search of some government horses. The horses had been taken by a Comanche raiding party. Spotting something in the distance, Captain Carroll brought his men to a halt. Reaching for his field glasses, he looked down the road. "Just as I thought, army horses." He turned to Stance. "When I give the word, we charge," he ordered. When the Indians got closer, Captain Carroll and his soldiers charged the band of Comanches. The gunfire was so loud you'd have thought the sky was falling. Captain Carroll and his men ran the Comanches into the mountains. Sergeant Stance and a few other soldiers rounded up horses. They prepared to take them back to Fort McKavett. But since the night had fallen, Captain Carroll ordered his men to set up camp near Kickapoo Springs. At dawn, the men headed back to the fort with their horses. Sergeant Stance heard gunfire. A small troop of soldiers who had been left to guard another herd of government horses was under fire from the band of Indians. The soldiers were greatly outnumbered. Stance could see that the Indians would soon take the horses and the lives of the soldiers who were guarding them. Quickly, Stance led his men straight into the middle of the attack. "Follow me," shouted Stance as he charged head-on into the Comanche gunfire. The Indians fought bravely, but they were no match for the well-trained soldiers of the Ninth Cavalry. They were chased into the hills, leaving the horses behind. Captain Carroll did not forget what he saw on the battlefield that day. When he returned to Fort McKavett, he recommended Emanuel Stance for the Congressional Medal of Honor. This medal is awarded to soldiers who risk their lives beyond the call of duty. On July 24th, 1870, Emanuel Stance received his Medal of Honor. He was the first black soldier to receive the medal, and he was the first of a long line of black men who proved their courage fighting as the trail was blazed westward. There's Emanuel getting his medal. So that is just one story of one Buffalo soldier that kind of gives you an idea of what they were doing in the Army at the time. I have another book here that I thought you guys might be interested in. You can check this out if you're interested. It's called The Buffalo Soldier, and it's by Sherry Garland. And it's an interesting story sort of from start to finish of the man's career as a Buffalo soldier. And then my favorite, this is for older readers, but this is by Farron Doss, who lived in Missoula for quite some time. And it is about one soldier in the 25th Infantry, which were the folks that were here at Fort Missoula. We also have the 24th Infantry here too. And it's his story. It's historical fiction, so it takes details from the real history and then makes up a character to make the story feel a little more relatable. And so this book talks about the bike soldiers as well. You can see them down there. So definitely check this out if you're maybe a little more advanced reader, maybe I'd probably high school or I don't know, probably a middle schooler who really like to read might enjoy this too. You can get it on Amazon, I believe. And if you want to know more about the bike soldiers that were at Fort Missoula, you can check out a couple of videos on our Facebook page, or you can give me a call or an email. I'd be happy to set up a program for you. And if you didn't get the activity kit that I was talking about, I'll try and make that available on our website. So in the meantime, keep exploring and check out the Smithsonian African American Museum and the Buffalo Soldiers Museum in Texas for more info about buffalo soldiers. Thanks.